Oh, 9 o'clock on your Friday afternoon now. Welcome in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Jack Felcher will be along with me here in just a second as we're cruising through your afternoon, getting you that much closer to the weekend starting as we're finally entering the final weekend before we have football. So you're going to have some NFL preseason this weekend, which you can get into that a little bit when it comes to things on the NFL Network locally here with the Panthers and all that kind of stuff. But next weekend, or this time next week, we'll be out at Charwood Golf Club for the Games Summer Golf Classic sponsored by Krager Showrooms, where we will, oh, God, did I say 9 a.m., by the way? Jeff Haley just texted me. I think I did say 9 a.m. It's noon on your Friday here. Forgive me. I made that mistake more than one time, especially today with how many hours consecutively I do this. But either way, this time next week, we'll be out there at the Games Summer Golf Classic as we get things set for at that point in time, week number 0. And then next week, the weekend after that, of course, to get things rolling proper with week number 1 of college football. And really, it starts on that Thursday. So you're going to have like Baylor and Auburn. You'll have Friday night games. I believe you're going to have Colorado and Georgia Tech that Friday night. Obviously, you have the entire Saturday slate, which we'll all get to take in, without interruption because we won't be going to the stadium or having to drive places to see the Carolina game because that'll be taking place on that Sunday. So looking forward to all that, and we'll have plenty of previews for that as we get closer coming up next week and the week after as, it's almost here. 16 days away. We're Sellers days away from kickoff before the season gets rolling, and looking forward to seeing what unfolds. And as we've talked about, and we'll get into this in just a second as we talk about the scrimmage number 2 coming up tomorrow. A lot of questions still about this team that are being talked about nationally, locally, that once we finally get rolling with games, we'll finally start to kind of, figure some of those things out. But a lot to get to over the course of the next couple of hours here. Jack going to be hanging with me for the next 2 hours as today our focus, and I like doing this on this show, and we have kind of a couple hours to expand on it as we've been looking the past couple days and weeks at every single Power 4 opponent that South Carolina is going to play. 10 of them this year because, of course, you play your 8 conference games. You play Virginia Tech, and then you play Clemson at the end of the year. And looking at something individually from all those teams. So we've looked at quarterbacks. Last week, we just looked at the matchup overall and said what concerns us and what makes us feel good about that, as well as yesterday we looked at the non-quarterbacks on each of these rosters that give us the biggest threat to South Carolina this upcoming season. We'll do that as well today when we look at these individual coaches and what we think of them, how they match up with Shane Beamer, and all those kind of things as this season does roll along. But we'll start off with some things here as we look at camp coming up this week, or camp rolling on as we get into scrimmage number 2 coming up this weekend. I want to kind of focus on some of the goals for what this team is going to be looking for this upcoming weekend in the scrimmage. And we come away from last weekend where you had scrimmage number 1, and again, Jack and other media people, they don't get to go out there and see this. It's just something that they have to get from those sources on the inside or people that did get to see it in terms of what happened. So you do take everything from a scrimmage with a little bit of a grain of salt because, again, you're probably not going to hear about the overly negative things, much like everything in camp. It's always going to have a positiveness to it. Even if somebody is struggling, we're not going to know the full extent of that until the games actually start coming up here in a couple weeks. So I kind of look at some of the goals for scrimmage number 2 coming up here in the next 24 hours or so. One of them obviously is health. Health is the most optimal thing at the end of the day when it comes to making sure that nobody gets hurt. And knock on wood, South Carolina's done a really good job, or has been fortunate so far through the offseason and camp and all those kind of things in terms of not dealing with major injuries. You've had some guys nicked up. I know JT Gear, even Rasul Faison had the shoulder thing the other day that was causing a little bit of concern, but nobody that is expected to be a huge player on this team to be sitting out with anything significant other than bumps and bruises and those kind of things. So health is obviously the most important thing, and you'd like to hear the trend carry over from last week as well with no turnovers. And that was something that Beamer noted on when he talked to the media on Tuesday, was that there was no turnovers from the offense in the scrimmage from last week, which obviously that's a big positive. Turnovers were something this offense struggled with quite a bit last year that you certainly hope is going to be cleaned up when the season comes along. And if you're able to have that same kind of success this weekend in the scrimmage. Hopefully that means it's going to translate over to the season starting here coming up in a couple weeks. But that's a couple of my things to hopefully hear from this weekend. What's at the list for you, Jack, that you want to hear coming away from the scrimmage?
I think the main thing is obviously number one, you want to stay healthy. Like you want to come out of this second scrimmage here, your final one, according to the practice schedule that was put out by South Carolina. You want to come out of this thing really healthy. No, like you're gonna have nicks and bruises. Like you had a little bit of that going on last weekend, and luckily nothing too bad at all from the looks of it. But you want to remain that way going forward, and then also you kind of want to start. If not yet, you kind of want to start figuring out, okay, who is in Shane Beamer's mind and the coach's mind, who is ahead in these competitions? Who is going to be the one that in the end wins the starting spots at, say, the free safety position or the linebacker positions or the offensive line? Even the special teams is another big one. So we may not necessarily get those direct answers from Shane Beamer in press conferences or whatever, and heck, even with the sources that Gamecock Central talks to and whatnot that are on the inside, may not even get a clear-cut idea of, we'll probably hear like who did good, who did bad, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Mainly probably who did good, but we'll probably won't get clear answers on who the starting guys are probably going to be until we do get that depth chart for week one here in about, probably on that Monday leading into game week. So those are probably the main things I would say I'm looking for. I kind of also want to see if the defense can create a takeaway or two, have a little bit more success in that way. Now, on the flip side, that would mean the offense would probably have to, have a turnover or an interception or a fumble.
Sure.
So you don't necessarily really want that, I guess. But at the very least, I think in a better sense, I'd rather see the defense just hold their own out there consistently. Maybe the offense gets on the board a few times, but I want to see some good from the defense in this game or in the scrimmage just because they're going to be so heavily counted on this year.
See, this is that double-edged sword again that I will jump back up on the soapbox. I think college football needs to have preseason games like every other sport to give you a better glimpse into what your team's going to be, but that's probably never ever going to happen, it seems like. But yeah, when you're looking at these scrimmage notes, and if we were able to watch these scrimmages like we get to watch the spring game, back in April, then you're saying, well, what's really good for one side is really bad for the other. So you almost kind of want this balance where everybody's just doing good enough where you can say, okay, the powers are kind of balanced on this team, and the offense turned it over, but it was a great play by the DB, or the defense forced a turnover, but it was a mistake by the offense, or something like that they can correct. So it's those kind of things that, again, you take with a little bit of a grain of salt, and we'll really figure out this team here in a couple weeks. But as I mentioned, the most important thing in the world is health. Do not get anybody hurt. Do not have any major players that are going to have to sit out early in the season with an injury. And that's unfortunately the risk you take with every practice and every scrimmage. But again, knock on wood, so far so good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what football is. I mean, you're going to deal with injuries throughout the year, and hopefully you can at least go into the season without anything super, super major. Again, aside from the guys that you already know are banged up and stuff and going to be out for a little while here, you hope you don't have any more guys, especially significant guys that you expect to be playmakers this year, added to that list. But again, you mentioned the fact of rounding it back to what I talked about before with if one side does good, that means something went wrong on the other side. I do wish we got into this mindset of we need to have preseason games, just like the NFL does. Because again, or honestly, worst case, joint practices could be good too. I mean, something like that, just to give coaches an idea of okay, how is my offense doing against, even if it's against a Wofford or something, how's my offense doing against another college defense out there that's not my own, right? Oh. And on the flip side, how's my defense doing against the college offense? I think that would just be good for everyone. And we see, Colorado wanted to do, I think, what was it, a spring game against Syracuse or something?
Yeah, they're going to do the joint practice thing.
Yeah, I just think we need to, as college feels more like the NFL in a lot of ways with how professional it is now with revenue sharing and all these other facets out there. I do wish we would get closer to seeing it like the NFL model of, okay, you have your joint practices, you have your preseason game at the end of the week. Just one would be really good, I think.
And I can agree with that, certainly. And it would prevent you from feeling like you're team is lopsided at this point in time. And Ed Bird, if we could get cut number 3 here, Virginia Tech head coach Brent Pry yesterday, when addressing the media, described his team as lopsided as they were practicing yesterday.
It's a good day, really competitive. Guys making plays, some guys still emerging, fighting for spots. Biggest thing, we were a little lopsided. One period would be really good for the offense and not so good for the defense. And then a couple periods later, it'd be the exact opposite. And my message to the guys, we got to answer. So when we can't let a period get away from us. And one side kind of just take over the whole thing and dominate the period. So we still got some growing to do that way, but they're coming. Good day.
I heard that yesterday, and initially that's almost an excitement, right? Like, oh man, BT struggling a little bit, that's good. And then I thought, wait a minute, does this feel like a trap? We've talked so much this offseason. Everybody's gassing up Carolina, for the most part, about how good they're expected to be. Sellers on this list, Stewart on this list, preseason All-Americans, all that kind of stuff. And Virginia Tech is that team that's kind of waiting in the shadows. Again, they lost a lot of one-score games last year. It's not like they were getting blown out by 40 points every single time. And look, I know Coach Beamer's nailing this into his players' heads, but for everybody else with the fan base, this isn't going to be a walk in the park. This is still a Power 4 team, and one that's fighting for their life right now with Pry being on the hot seat. If you don't play your best game, you can lose to these guys.
It feels dangerous in a lot of ways. The way South Carolina's been hyped up this entire offseason, and then, week 1 for Carolina in recent years has not been particularly glamorous. Last year, easily could have lost to Old Dominion. Like, I don't want to say they should have lost that game, but the way they played wasn't great.
Sure.
And then the year before that, again, they really did not look that good against UNC, and they lost that season opener at a neutral site, mind you. So, we talk about the similarities going into the season for this year versus 2023 after coming off a really great season. We need to see – the one thing we have not seen, I think, in the Beamer era for South Carolina is consistent success, right? What is Carolina going to do to build off of last year? It's not the end of the world if they took a step back and won like 8 games or something, but you got to get off to a really good start to have success this year. And winning that Virginia Tech game, it's massive. Like, it's of the utmost importance, not just because it's the next game on the schedule, but it's one that, like, if you were to win that game, it probably takes a little bit of the heat off you as you head into September. And it's like, all right, we can go out here. We're comfortable. We'll win these games. Yeah, definitely so. And again, theme for today's show is looking at these individual coaches, assessing them and how we feel about them and the individual matchups they're going to have with South Carolina. And we will start with Brent Pry and the Virginia Tech Hokies coming up on the other side as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Ed Bird producing on your Friday here on The Game.
Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass on your Friday here on the game. Remind you once again, this time next week, it's the Game Summer Golf Classic sponsored by Krager Showrooms, formerly The Nest in the Vista. We're going to be out at Charwood Golf Club. Tee time is at 9. Registration begins that morning at 7:30. You can join us for some delicious onion sausages for breakfast. The mimosa bar will be provided by Saki's Wine and Spirits, and as always, Firehouse Subs for lunch. We'll have prizes to give away, and the golf gun makes its return next week as well. If you want to take part, it's only $400 for a team. Call Charwood at 803-755-2000 and press the number 2 to sign up for the Game Summer Golf Classic, sponsored by Krager Showrooms. So today we're going to go through the individual coaches of these other teams South Carolina's facing from a Power 4 standpoint. And again, no disrespect to South Carolina State, no disrespect to Coastal Carolina at the end of the year, but kind of focusing on the Power 4 opponents because there's 10 of them that Carolina's going to have to face. And we'll start off with the guy that we just heard from a second ago in Brent Pry. Honestly, if South Carolina was not playing Virginia Tech in week number 1, how much attention do you think you would have paid to VT and Brent Pry this offseason?
Not much at all. Not much at all. And look, we went to last year. I think there was a lot of noise about how VT was a dark horse to win the ACC.
I do remember
coming
that.
Into the year. Yeah, I mean, I think we all remember that. Then that week 1 game, they go out to Vanderbilt, and they surprisingly lose. And it's like, huh? They lost to Vanderbilt week 1? Well, that kind of ended their season before it even started. Again, they went on to, have like a mediocre season at best. But it's one that's kind of put Brent Pry on the hot seat in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't think we would have paid him a whole lot of attention because, and I remember those conversations going into last year, like, hey, watch out, this VT team, they can be sneaky, they can be good, and it just ended up happening. And yes, Vanderbilt ended up being a lot better than we thought they were going to be, but that week 1 really, I think, soured a lot of people on what they thought Virginia Tech could have been last year. And again, they ended up being right in a lot of ways because they underachieved. Now, again, they did lose a lot of one-score games. And look, Brent Pry is a defensive-minded head coach. I'm always going to be weary of defensive head coaches because they say defense wins championships for a reason, because having a good defense is always going to give you a chance. Again, this is a team with maybe even more unknowns than South Carolina, with new coordinators on both sides, including Philip Montgomery on the offensive side. They had to hit the transfer portal really, really hard. We just don't know. But I don't look at the way players have developed under Pry the same way I do the players' development under South Carolina. So I'm hoping that ends up being the beneficial part of Carolina in this game coming up in a couple weeks, that Beamer and company have gotten more out of the guys they have than Virginia Tech does.
And as you kind of mentioned there a little bit, I mean, there were a lot of changes made after the season for Virginia Tech. For starters, I mean, like you said, new coordinators in there with Sam Seifkiss as the defensive coordinator. Now, you mentioned Brent Pry, defensive-minded guy, which is true. I just wonder, with a young DC coming in to take over, how much – obviously everything will go through Brent Pry, but I do wonder how much they'll lean on the coordinator compared to, Pry as the head coach with, calling the shots there defensively, and then Philip Montgomery on offense. And he's a guy that, brings head coaching experience and whatnot and offensive innovation. So I'm looking forward to seeing in this first game of the year what this offense is going to look like with Kyron Drones and some of the new guys in there stored at running back, how that kind of looks, and obviously replaced offensive line coach. And then they also did, change with strength and conditioning as well. So a lot looks different there out in Blacksburg. The one thing that remains constant is Brent Pry. And I think they've really underachieved out there. I mean, 16-21 so far in his tenure out there with the Hokies. But this does feel like a make or break year. And it's one that, like, coming into the year, as we mentioned in the last segment, Tyler, there was so much buzz about South Carolina this offseason and stuff. We don't really hear much about the Hokies.
Yep.
And then you hear from Brent Pry himself that it was kind of like a one-sided practice and stuff the other day. I just wonder if it's kind of a trap game for South Carolina in a sense where you got all these expectations. And what if you lay an egg, kind of like what Virginia Tech did last year out of Vanderbilt?
So after that, they'll play SC State the week after that, and then they'll play Vanderbilt here at home in week number 3. And look, I like Clark Lee, and I think watching Any Given Saturday on Netflix has even made me like him a little bit more because, like, he gets it, right? He played at Vanderbilt. He understands what the mantra around that program is, and his goal is like, hey, I want to be the guy that finally changes this. And yes, in his 4 years, they've had 2-10 seasons, but there have been several moments of them beating teams that you felt like they had no business beating. Obviously, Alabama becomes to mind with that game last year. But go back to 3 years ago now against in 2022, they beat Kentucky and Florida at the end of the 2022 season. Nobody thought they had any business beating those teams. So that's always something in the back of my mind is like Clark Lee can coach. It's not consistent, but he can coach his team up to meet the challenge of very formidable opponents. Not again consistently, but every now and then. And believe me, they're going to come in here fired up and ready to go, probably off of a win themselves in the first couple weeks of the season to feel like they're in gear to take on South Carolina and the challenge that is Willie B on a Saturday night.
Now, you mentioned Saturday night and all that. The week before that, do you know where they play the week before?
They play against Virginia Tech.
In Blacksburg. So
in Blacksburg.
That's a night game too. So, I think Vandy is much better coming into this season. There are a few things here with Clark Lee and and Vanderbilt. But number one, obviously they're coming off the game against Virginia Tech at night, which very well could be a loss because it's tough to go into Blacksburg and win at night, number one. But you look at Vanderbilt coming off the 7-6 season. Again, Clark Lee, phenomenal job last year with the Commodores, surprising so many people, obviously beating Alabama. The hype for them, I feel like, is real going into the year. Like, I'm not saying national championship, obviously, though I think their expectation is that they can go out there and do it. The one thing I just worry about with this second year with Clark and those guys, and you hear Pavia talking about how they're going to do amazing things this year and whatnot. The thing I worry about is, are they over last year? Like, you talk about championship hangovers and stuff, but in Vanderbilt's case, they haven't had this type of success before. Are they going to be good enough to do it again? That's the main thing. And can they kind of control the narrative of like, okay, last year was last year, we're moving on to this year?
I think it's very much similar to how we looked at how a lot of people nationally looked at South Carolina coming off of the great year in 2022, where they pulled off the big upsets and won 8 games that year, and then immediately followed it up with a 5-7 missed a bowl game, to where people had not seen enough yet to believe that South Carolina was consistent. Last year, they go out there and win, 9 games and have the season that they had, and people are thinking, okay, if they can back that up this year with 8 or 9 wins, then we're going to say that's a consistent program and Beamer's got things on the right track. I think I think the jury's still out on Vanderbilt in the same way. It's like, all right, every other year has looked good. 2-10 year 1, 5-7 year 2, 2-10 after that, and now the 7-6 campaign a year ago. But can you do it consecutively in back-to-back years? And last year, again, was the most juiced year I've ever seen out of Vanderbilt in recent memory. If they can follow that up with another 7 to 8 win campaign, I think that's when we start saying, okay, this is a team that's hitting its stride a little bit, and this is what we expect out of them every single year, but we're not there yet.
And I think Clark does such a great job. Again, we see it evident in the Netflix documentary of letting these guys know, like, hey, you can go out there and do it. Like, you can go. It's not a surprise when they go out there and beat Alabama in their minds, because they expect to do this. And a lot of it has to do with Diego Pavia and him coming in and kind of changing the culture, changing the narrative. But I feel like Clark Lee has just done a really good job. Obviously, this was his dream to be at Vanderbilt and stuff as a former player, grew up in Nashville and all that. But if they can go into Blacksburg and win week 2, that really does set the table for them to go out there in week 3 at South Carolina, and it will not be a cakewalk. Like, we talk about Carolina potentially going 4-1 or 5-0 in those first 5 games of the year. Vanderbilt could really change that if they're coming in hot.
Yeah, we'll continue to hit more coaches on the other side. We'll get into Missouri as well as Kentucky and LSU as we continue to look at the coaches South Carolina's going up against this upcoming season as the halftime show rolls along. Presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Ed Bird on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show presented by Men's Clinic of South Carolina, Tyler Head, Jack Belcher, Ed Bird on your Friday here on the game. Again, if you've not heard, on Monday you'll be able to listen to us out in Charleston on WIWF 96.9 HD3. So you can listen to us here in Columbia, listen to us in Florence, out in Myrtle Beach, and now in Charleston as well. We simply make it impossible not to listen. You can also take us with you wherever you go on the 107.5 The Game app, as well as streaming on the Game TV. Sponsored by Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. So we're looking at coaches now, Jack, and we've gone through the first two games of the Power 4 opponents, at least. Now look at game number 3, a trickier matchup. Game number 4 in the schedule, game number 3 against Power 4 opponent. Your first true road trip. Yeah, Atlanta's a neutral site. That doesn't really count. You got to fly all the way to Como, the weird Midwestern place of the SEC, taking on that dastardly Eli Drinkwitz and the Missouri Tigers. And you got one over on them last year, finally. It was close. You had to sweat it out there at the very end. But you're not to the point where people look at Drinkwitz and say, yeah, that's a coach that we should beat, because he's gotten it over on you more times than not.
Yeah, he has dominated the Mayor's Cup rivalry against South Carolina. And even going back to before he was at Missouri, he was at App State when App State beat South Carolina in 2019 in his 1 year out with the Mountaineers before moving out to the Midwest. But look, he's done a really good job with Missouri. You really can't deny it. I mean, 11-2 in 2023 and 10-3 last year. And, there's all this discussion about, they don't play a tough schedule, which I think is very true. But again, they're still getting the job done. They're getting success, and they're having good years. So, they rewarded him with a brand new contract extension through 2029. So, this is going to be a tough one because South Carolina has not had a good track record of going to Missouri and playing particularly well, especially in the Beamer era over the last few years. Every time they've gone out there and played Missouri, these games typically have not been close. We'll see if that changes this year. You hope it's different, and you hope everyone stays healthy for Carolina and whatnot. But this is going to be a different-looking Missouri team in a lot of ways, with so many new pieces at quarterback, running back, receiver, some new, some old guys on defense. But it's going to be a different-looking Missouri team, and we'll see if they're able to capitalize off of what they've done the last few years.
I think this year's Missouri team may be his toughest coaching job yet, because of the talent that you lost, your quarterback, your two receivers, guys on defense from a year ago that helps you win those double-digit games over the course of the last couple of years. And now, like just about everybody, you got a lot of questions. And I don't think they've officially announced Bo Perbula as the starter, unless I missed that headline in the last couple of days. I believe it's still a battle with him and Sam Horn coming down to the wire towards the end of camp.
Yeah, that seems to still be the case. And I do wonder which direction they will go. I think Perbula is probably the easy, obvious choice because he's the Penn State transfer. You brought him in for a reason. But again, this job could easily go to Sam Horn. You're really going to need to figure out that. But it's also like you lost your number one running back. You lost your top two receivers. How are you going to get this offense to a point where it's like you can be competitive in these games? That's a big question that is going to have to be answered this year.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. You end your 5-game slate to start the regular season before your first bye. Take it on Kentucky. And it's kind of like an opposite side of the spectrum when you talk about the dynamic between Missouri and South Carolina and the one between South Carolina and Kentucky. And look, Kentucky is a program that had the advantage over Carolina for a while. But really since Beamer's been here, outside of that first year in 2021, they've gotten the better of them, including beating them pretty soundly last year. So you almost kind of look at Mark Stoops and Kentucky and say, well, that's a program that Carolina should have no problem beating. And this year looks no different. I said this is going to be a tough coaching job for Eli Drinkwitz this year. It's going to be really tough for Mark Stoops because, one, his roster does not look good outside of, a couple players that we noted on yesterday. But, two, he's got more pressure on him than ever right now, it feels like, at Kentucky to be successful.
I would say so. This is it's crazy saying it. This is year 13 for Mark Stoops. And, he's been the longest tenure coach in the SEC by far now that Nick Saban's no longer coaching at Alabama, going to that second year with Kalen DeBoer. But Stoops, he's had some success at Kentucky, but last year was not a good season for them. And again, the last we saw of Kentucky, they were getting the brakes beaten off them by Louisville to end just a really abysmal 4-8 season. And it's crazy because South Carolina, when they played Kentucky, Carolina was 10-point underdogs going into that game. You gotta remember, they were coming off the really ugly Old Dominion game. So, look, I'm not really confident about Stoops. A lot of new faces on this roster. The seat is probably pretty warm for him. But again, he just had the contract extension. So we're going to see what happens with Kentucky. But, I mean, there's got to be some sense of urgency for Stoops coming into this game. And, the stupid sunglasses thing still lives on, I guess.
It's one of those things that, like, it would take a disastrous season, I feel like, for Stoops to get fired because of what his buyout is, the new contract, and all that kind of stuff. But, I mean, Kentucky is capable of having a pretty terrible season, like 2-10 or something like that, where that could end up happening. So we'll have to see. Again, you can't overlook any game, but that's probably the conference game that, it's usually Vanderbilt you say that about, but that's the one I think people are the most confident in because you just don't see the threats right now from Kentucky. But give them credit. They did beat Ole Miss last year, and we thought they didn't have a chance in that one. So anything can happen. You got to be careful with Mark Stoops' Kentucky team.
The one thing I do worry about, though, with this game, again, this probably is the easiest SEC game you'll have this year, and it's at home. The one thing I do worry about, though, is what if you come off a loss at Missouri or something? Like, what if you're coming off your high horse of beating Missouri or even going to Missouri and losing, and it's like you got to bounce back the next week with a win? That can always be a trap game, and if Kentucky gets off to a semi-decent start this year, that could be a little bit of trouble for Carolina, but I still feel good about them for sure going into that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll hit one more here before we get out of this segment. LSU, that's going to be your toughest road game of the entire year when you go into Death Valley. After that bye, coming up in early October. And, we talk so much about Brian Kelly and the fact that, let's be honest, he has underachieved to a degree since he's been at LSU because they've had the players and the rosters seemingly capable of a lot of great things, but outside of an appearance in the SEC championship game, they haven't accomplished a whole lot. They've been good, but we think they're a program that should be kind of on that level of great to consistently really, really good that they just have not been these past couple years. But again, going into Death Valley is going to be tough. And look, Brian Kelly, as much as we, are critical of him for some of his personal antics and the way he composes himself at time, he's still a really good coach. I mean, he got the LSU job for a reason because they generally think that he can bring them back to a national championship level. Haven't seen it yet, but he's always a coach that seems like he's one season away from taking that next step and really becoming the coach that we think he should have been all these years.
I mean, this is boom or bust for LSU this year. I feel like I don't think Kelly gets fired this season unless things just go awry and it's like you win like 8 games or something. Like you have another year like you did last year, maybe. But for LSU this year, I mean, I don't know how long those fans are going to be patient with him if things don't get off to a good start. I mean, week 1, LSU has been awful in week 1 games. Yep. I mean, they just, for whatever reason, they cannot seem to get the job done in week 1. And it gets tougher this year because you're going to Clemson. And I'm not going to be surprised at all if Clemson wins that game pretty handedly because we expect Clemson to be very, very good this year. But at the same time, LSU is supposed to be this really, really good team that a lot of people, I've seen it all over. A lot of people have LSU not only just making the playoff, but becoming a serious contender to win a national championship this year. So the pressure's on, and you have your Heisman potential QB coming back. You have a stacked wide receiver room. Your defense should hopefully be taking another step forward this year and improving. You got some really good guys coming back, especially like Harold Perkins returning off of injury and Whit Weeks coming back for another year again. But it's still the fact of like LSU has had all this talent for years now. And the best they've done, like you said, Tyler, they've won a Heisman Trophy with Jaden Daniels, and they've also made it to the SEC championship.
Yeah.
That's nowhere near good enough. for that type of program.
Yeah, and especially with the way defense has been, these past handful of years, it was better last year, but still left some to be desired. We talked about yesterday a guy like Harold Perkins and being able to utilize him right, where you can get back on track to how he was his freshman year, I think is going to be a big question of this Brian Kelly team this upcoming year. But make no doubt about it, going into Death Valley for that game and whatever week that is, that'll be the 6th game of the year, is going to be the toughest challenge of the entire year for South Carolina. And gosh, if you can come away from that and you can get your lick back on Kelly from a year ago, we're going to be feeling pretty darn good about this South Carolina team, that's for sure.
And coming off a bye week, so you got ample time to get ready for this game. You got to win it. If you don't, not the end of the world, but it's going to be a big one.
We'll take a look more at these coaches coming up in hour number 2. Up next, though, Irmo's Little League team off to a red-hot start in the Little League World Series. With that coming up next as the extra point rolls along. It's our head, Jack Beltry, Ed Bird on your Friday on the Game.
lifted to left, and it's gone. There's a grand slam for Joe Giulietti. 8-0 Irmo, South Carolina, and you can almost feel it coming.
Welcome back in. It is the halftime show brought to you by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Ed Bird on the other side of the glass here on your Friday. That was the call yesterday. Joe Giulietti from Irmo hitting a grand slam, helping the Irmo Little League team rout, dismantle, dominate. There's a lot of adjectives we could use to describe what happened yesterday. 13-0 run rule shutout of Massachusetts to give them a 1-0 start to the Little League World Series up there in Williamsport.
Yep. I mean, what a really dominating game for Irmo, and what a run they've been on. I mean, that game they had to get to Williamsport, winning on a walk-off 3-run double over Florida last week was just insane. And now they're 4 wins away from moving on or winning the whole thing. Obviously, they got to get through the United States side of the bracket, and they won't play an international team until they get to the championship round. But so a good start for them as they await to play the winner of the next round coming up.
Yeah, so cool for them. I didn't get a chance to ask because Elijah was out there at the watch party yesterday in North Carolina Wings. I imagine that was probably pretty fun when you can just watch your team dominate the other team. It wasn't even a full 2-hour game, I don't think. I think it ended about 4:30 yesterday because they just put up so many runs, and what the rule is after 4 innings, I believe, is when if you're up by 10, then the game's over.
Yeah, I turned the game on I turned on my TV to watch around like 4:45, and I'm like, oh, they're already getting ready for the next game. And I checked the score, and it was 13-0. I was hoping to watch a little bit more yesterday, but saw some of the highlights and whatnot, and Giulietti has been unbelievable for them. I mean, you got to remember, he scored the winning run when I think it was in the Florida game. He was intentionally walked with the bases loaded to bring home a run for Irmo because Florida just did not want to pitch to him.
Sure.
And lo and behold, he goes ahead and scores the game-winning run to get them to Williamsport.
Yeah, no, a great run for him so far, and certainly wish those guys the best luck with their next game coming up here in a couple days. I wanted to hit this real quick as we wrap up the hour. I saw this yesterday, and Jack, given that both you and I went to journalism school, we're very familiar with the AP style book, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I still have mine somewhere. I think in my collection, just books at my apartment. And every now and then, I'll still occasionally have a thought about something or trying to write something and make sure I want to get it right. And reference that because, again, that's kind of the golden rule or the gold standard across all of writing is, hey, reference the AP style book. If you have a question about something, where to put a comma or the way you write something out or something along those lines. And it's rules you have to follow to a T in our industry, in the journalism industry. But you know what, Jack? Sometimes they can be wrong. Have you ever seen the AP style book being correct about something?
Trying to think. I've not used that in a little bit, to be honest. Not that I can remember.
So yesterday, the AP Style Book, which does have a Twitter account, tweeted out this: spell out the number 5 when referring to the Power 5, the group of conferences that generate the most athletic revenue in the NCAA and have some autonomy to create rules. This group includes the Big 10, the Big 12, the Atlantic Coast Conference, Southeastern Conference, and Pac-12. AP Top 25 College Football Preseason Rankings preview the season that kicks off Saturday, August 23rd, and has a link to the AP website. Incorrect AP Style Book. There is no longer a Power 5. It is now a Power 4, which you would spell out F-O-U-R. So, yes, it's a technical error. Yes, they're correct. You still have to spell the word out instead of write the number. But still, we'll count that as an L for the AP Style Book this time.
Yeah, they got to get it updated as soon as possible. Send out new copies, but yeah, that's kind of a big gaffe by the AP there. So gotta come on. We want the Pac-12 to live on, but they're not coming back just yet. Soon,
no.
But not in the same way we remember.
Well, and look, they're gonna become the 8-pack, I guess, next year. And I still don't. I guess they're trying to capitalize off the name of the Pac-12 having more cachet. they should have just brought Oregon State and Washington State into the Mountain West instead of splitting the Mountain West in half and making the Pac-8, 8-pack, whatever we're going to call it, coming up next year. Because, again, nobody's going to look at that and say, all right, now that you got Boise and Colorado State, we're going to start taking you seriously as a conference again. Like, no, you're still a G5 conference. You always will be. And, it's unfortunate because it's shows the greed of college football and college sports in general, but it's where we are. And, yeah, the Pac-12 is now in, I guess, what we call the G6, the group of 6, as opposed to the group of 5.
And did you see that Washington State and Oregon State are playing each other twice this year?
Well, they have
in the
to.
Same month.
Again,
they have to.
They have a scheduling agreement with the Mountain West, but they're not full members, so they got to kind of do something, which, like, I don't blame them. It's weird, man. It's so weird how that happened and how we have this conference with 2 teams.
It's just if you had told me a few years ago the Pac-12 was going to disassemble and all these teams would go to the Big Ten, ACC, and stuff, and then you'd have 2 teams left in the Pac-2. I wouldn't have believed you. It's kind of crazy still to think about.
It absolutely is. We'll see if the AP style book updates themselves, but for now, we can say that they were actually wrong about something. Hour number 2 on the way, we'll talk more about the coaching matchups for South Carolina, and also the sanctions against Michigan have also been announced. We'll dive into that as well as the show goes along. It's Halftime Show sponsored by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Ed Bird on your Friday here on The Game. Hey, this is Tyler Head for Old Timey Meat Market. You'll find their shelves stocked with various cuts and grades of beef, pork, poultry, seafood, and exotic meats. The selection are always fresh, never frozen, competitively priced, and of the highest quality. You can get all you need at Old Timey Meat Market. And what better way to cheer on your Gamecocks than with your own Traeger grill? You can grill out with family and friends. Old Timey Meat Market has plenty of Traeger grills in stock, plenty of pellets, rubs, sauces, and accessories too. You can come by Old Timey Meat Market in Lexington today to look at their many sizes of Traeger grills. You can also visit all their locations to take in all their great products in not only Lexington, but St. Andrews, South Congaree as well. Old Timey Meat Market, no better place to get your meat for football season, which is coming up here very soon. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, Jack Beltry, Ed Bird along with you on your Friday here on the game as we get closer to the last, mostly quiet weekend before college football gets rolling. And gosh, I can't wait next week, Jack. We'll be talking about week 0, talking about Farmageddon over in Ireland, getting set for a game day that next morning. Man, it's going to be great. I'm so excited.
Our preseason football this weekend. We'll have some high school football probably going on somewhere in some places. Maybe not around here in South Carolina much, but next week, week 0, the week after that, week 1, man, it's getting real close now.
I did mention earlier on this morning that last night there was the Buford High School versus Milton High School game on ESPN, and those are 2 of the top programs in the state of Georgia, and thought to be some of the top programs in the entire country in terms of their championships and the type of talent that they put out. And I watched some of that game and got to see Buford's $62 million high school football stadium up close and personal on the TV, and it looks like it cost $62 million.
Oh, it's gorgeous, that stadium. It's really nice, and there are a lot of good ones here in South Carolina. You get River Bluff, Dorman, schools like that. Topper Ridge has got a pretty good one, but man, that's $62 million is a lot of money for a high school stadium, but that's obviously an area that definitely cares about its high school football team.
Yeah, must be nice. Either way, getting back to our conversation about coaches around the SEC that South Carolina is going to have to take on this year. Went through the first 5 Power 4 opponents with Virginia Tech, Vandy, Missouri, Kentucky, and LSU. Now we get into the back half of the schedule, or the back 5 of that schedule in terms of our opponents. And we start off with none other than Oklahoma and Brent Venables. Now, Brent Venables obviously in a bit of a hot seat situation himself with 2 disappointing years and a good 10-win season in the middle of that. But the standard at Oklahoma has definitely lowered. And look, they put their eggs in the basket of a guy in John Mateer coming in there and setting the world on fire. Questions still abound at offensive line because that was a big issue a year ago. But you know one thing, and again, I go back to what I said about Brent Pry, a defensive-minded head coach like Brent Venables, obviously the track record of his time at Clemson speaks for itself. He's always going to have a team that's going to have a chance in a game with that defense.
Oh, I mean, a phenomenal defensive mind that Brent Venables is. I mean, you look at those years at Clemson, he was there. So much of that success came from that defense. And look at the players they churned out year after year after year during the height of Clemson's powers in the mid-2010s. But, being in Oklahoma now, a lot more disappointment than positives. You have 2 underwhelming seasons. Then you have a 10-win season right in between. But you're 0-3 in bowl games, which take bowl games for what you will. But, 0-3 in bowl games is 0-3. You look at the offseason that they've had, new quarterback, new running back. You hope the defense can kind of pick up where they left off last year, new coordinators. It's going to look a lot different. And for Oklahoma, you hope it's a lot different in a good way for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you think about that game being here, you like the advantage of playing at home, obviously. And that's, as we've talked about, a team that's going to be coming off of the Red River game the week before, just like they were last year. And you hope that is a tough, physical, 4-quarter fight of a game that brings them in maybe a little bit fatigued coming off of that one. Now, again, Carolina's going to have to play LSU the week before that, so they don't exactly have a cakewalk there either. But you hope the added element of that being a rivalry game can maybe take a little extra something out of Oklahoma at that point in time. And, we're going to be halfway through the season at that point in time. And if Oklahoma is off to a really, really good start, the vibe's going to be good, the hype's going to be high. But if they're off to a shaky start and, let's say they're, 3-3 or something along those lines, that's when I think Venables will really start feeling the pressure. It's going into that Carolina game, and they'll be in the we have to win this game territory. Not that you don't want to win every single game, but the pressure to win that game is going to be extremely high if they get off to a rocky start.
Oh, totally. You got Michigan coming into town week number 2 under the lights. That's going to be the early indication of, all right, where's this thing heading for Oklahoma? They're not going to fire him after that game if things go really bad, but it can kind of begin the rabbit hole of, all right, if you lose that game, you could let it slide into the next game potentially. They go to Temple for one of these random times where a big-time school or big-time, powerhouse program goes to a group of 5 school, and they're going to Temple September 13th. So you really hope you're able to get off to a good start. You got Auburn and then Kent State, and then it really picks up from October on. So I think Oklahoma's going to be able to get off to a fine start. But again, like you said, Tyler, like both these teams are coming off really big games before they meet each other. I think it's kind of a wash when you talk about if one has the advantage over the other based on what happens the week before. But I mean, if you're South Carolina, you get these guys at home. So that's probably the advantage they need right there.
After that, here comes Alabama. I think that obviously speaks for itself in a lot of ways, but it's not as scary as it once was because DeBoer has not quite proven himself, right? Last year was disappointing. They missed the playoff. That should never happen in a 12-team playoff era at Alabama. And look, they got a ton of good talent. We were talking with Brett Ciancia of Pick Six Previews in the 11 o'clock hour, and he mentioned that he believes Alabama has more 5-stars than anybody else on their roster in the entire country. So they still have a lot of good talent, and we'll see how after spending a year in the SEC, Kalen DeBoer can have a better year. Look, we've talked about it. He's not good on the road. They're coming into Williams-Brice Stadium. Again, you hope that's an advantage for the Gamecocks, but that's another team that if they get off to a shaky start, then they could really be feeling the heat by the time they come in here for that 7th game.
Totally. And it feels like Alabama's still very much, the players are very much still bought into Kalen DeBoer and believing what he's going to do with the Crimson Tide. So I think he's got that going from him from the standpoint of like, look, last year was not a great year for Alabama. They won 9 games, so I think most programs would take that. But when you're in the shadow of Nick Saban and you win all those national championships and stuff, the standard at Alabama is different. So, look, they are basically returning all their star players from last year. This should be a team that I think is going to be very, very good, competing for a chance to go to the playoffs and obviously have a chance to win a national championship from there. It all starts at quarterback, though.
Yep.
And Ty Simpson going to be under center for the Crimson Tide week 1. I just wonder, this is we've seen it before with Alabama with starting these quarterbacks that we have not seen play much before. You think of Jake Coker 10 years ago, and you think of Mac Jones from 5 years ago. They both won national championships in their first year as the starter. Can Ty Simpson kind of follow that same formula? I think Alabama's going to be a lot better this year, but we'll have to see what Kalen DeBoer can do with this group that he's got back, a very talented team at that.
Well, and he's also got his offensive coordinator back in Ryan Grubb, who was going to come with him last year, decided to take the Seahawks job, got fired from that, and is now, back with Alabama and back with Kalen DeBoer. So I wonder how that familiarity with those two guys and how they run their offense is going to potentially help them. Again, the confidence in quarterback is probably not as high as you had a year ago. But here's the thing about that team. With as talented as they are, and again, I just told you that I think they have the most 5-stars of anybody in the entire country, from the Saban era of recruiting. And give Kalen DeBoer credit. He's done a good job still recruiting himself, in the couple seasons or the couple recruiting cycles since. So they're going to come in here, and they're going to be a tough team to deal with, obviously. And I think you have a lot of confidence, though, knowing that, look, nobody gave you a chance last year. We all went into that game like, all right, well, Alabama coming off a loss to Vanderbilt, they're going to be as fired up as ever, and they're probably going to take out their frustrations on Carolina. It didn't happen. And a few less self-inflicted wounds, you probably walk out of Bryant-Denny Stadium a winner. And, you hope that confidence coming away from that game, knowing how close you were, translates over to the matchup this year.
You hope so. I mean, South Carolina was a heavy, heavy underdog going into that game. And again, like you said, if not for a few mistakes late in that game, Carolina probably wins that game. I still think back to that throw that Lenore Sellers really missed on with the 2-point conversion at the end of the game. I was talking about it with somebody yesterday. Like, the play was there, right to Vandrevius Jacobs on the rollout. the throw was just off target. So not just that, the fumbles were also a big issue in that game. So got a lot to clean up from that standpoint heading into this season. But again, you get this game at home, and potentially under the lights. That's a huge, huge advantage for Carolina.
So after that, when we get into the month of November, taking on Ole Miss out there in Oxford. Again, this is a team that came in a year ago and embarrassed you. It was ugly. It was a game that we didn't enjoy watching or talking about in the Monday after that. And Oxford's not the most intimidating environment in the world. You're going to have to deal with a very, very bright offensive mind in Lane Kiffin with a quarterback that people are really excited about in Austin Simmons. And Lane seems to finally kind of be hitting his stride. When we talk about the consistency of being a perennial 9-10 win program that you expect, just given the benefit of doubt here, expect to be kind of in that same realm this upcoming season as well.
Yeah, 3 10-win seasons in 4 years for Ole Miss. So Lane Kiffin has done a very good job with that program ever since he took over. And he's kind of turned his coaching career around in a lot of ways. But the one thing that Ole Miss is really missing under Lane, all these good things they've done, but they just always fall short in the end of making the playoffs. And it's different now in the 12-team era. But look, the 12-team playoff was made for teams like Ole Miss and Penn State, the teams that always miss the cut, that were right there on the bubble. And you look at what Ole Miss brought in last year. They went all in, it felt like, with Jackson Dart and bringing in so many great players to have on the team. But it just did not work out to where they lost to Kentucky. They lost to Florida. I mean, those games that they dropped, it was a bit disappointment for them. So coming off that, roster's going to look a bit different this year. I just wonder, this is kind of the same thing with Eli Drinkowitz. The roster is going to be different. It's going to probably be the big challenge for Lane to see how much he can really squeeze out of these guys.
Yeah, no, I will never not say that last year's team should have been in the college ball playoff with the talent that they had and what that team is capable of. But yeah, when you lose to teams like Kentucky during the regular season, Florida towards the end of the regular season, you're obviously not going to get in. And again, they came in here and they ran over South Carolina. I'm not, denying that happened. But it would feel pretty good if Beamer can go. That would be a signature win of the season, I feel like certainly. And we don't know where Ole Miss is going to be ranked at that point in time, if they are ranked at all. But that would be, especially with the jabbing back and forth when it comes to the Ole Miss and South Carolina fan base, that win would feel good. And for Beamer to finally get one over on Lane Kiffin.
Totally. I mean, coming off how disappointing that game was last year, it was over in 5 minutes, it felt like. I mean, after that fake punt went awry, I mean, South Carolina, if they were able to really, you want to talk about getting into the playoff this year, you got to go to Oxford and probably win that game. You got to at least split that 2-game road trip you have with a bye week in the middle. So it's going to be tough, but I think South Carolina, depending on how they do early in the year, I think they're in a better place right now than where Ole Miss is compared to a year ago, and we'll see if that carries over into the season.
2 more Power 4 opponent coaches to talk about on the other side. Texas A&M and Clemson. We'll hit that next as the halftime show presented by Men's Clinic of South Carolina rolls on your Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry with you on your Friday here on The Game. Again, starting Monday, you can be able to listen to The Game in Charleston as well as in Columbia, Myrtle Beach, and Florence. And Charleston will be on WIWF 96.9 HD3. You can tune in to us there, listen to us all day long. As always, you can also take us with you wherever you go on the 107.5 The Game app, as well as streaming live on The Game TV, sponsored by Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. Jack, got to run here in a couple minutes, but we'll get to these last couple coaches that Carolina is going to see in the Power 4 slate this year. And in mid-November, you're running into Texas A&M, a team that a year ago looked pretty scary coming in here to Williams-Brice Stadium. Carolina wins that game pretty handily. Fans storm the field and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like I don't feel like that's where the slide kind of started for them, as they reverted back to their 8-4 norm, it seems like, as that season closed out. I still think Mike Elko's a really good coach. I think he's very solid. I don't know if he's ever going to be that guy that's going to, lead Texas A&M to a national championship or something along those lines, but I think he's a good, solid coach that, until they get impatient, I guess, can be around College Station for a very long time.
I think he's got all the resources he needs out in College Station in Texas to have the utmost success, right? I think that is more than what you need to get the job done. And look, last year, 8-5, had a lot of success. You had a 7-game winning streak. And don't forget, this A&M team was coming into Columbia as a top 10 team in the country last year before things kind of fell apart for them a little bit in that month of November, where they lost to the Gamecocks, and then they lost that quadruple overtime game to Auburn, and then obviously they lost in the bowl game to USC, Southern Cal. So last year was not really the best year for Elko and company. You add a lot of new talent. You have 8 transfers coming in. I think this is another thing where you have Marcel Reed under center. What kind of jump is he going to take in year 2? We talk about the same with DJ Lagway at Florida and Lenore Sellers at South Carolina. But Marcel Reed, I feel like, doesn't get talked about enough. And how can Mike Elko and that offense kind of develop with him under center?
Yeah, well, we'll certainly have to see. And here's the thing. I don't think we still have a full scope of Mike Elko as a head coach. Again, you look at his record, 9-4, 7-5 in 2 years at Duke, 8-5 last year at A&M. That's where I get the idea of him, being solid is. But we have to see him kind of break through to that next level to think that he's going to be able to be capable of taking Texas A&M to that. And that being said, as you talked about, they have a talented roster. Yesterday, when we talked about, non-quarterbacks that are a threat to Carolina from each of these teams, I brought up Le'Veon Moss. Amari Daniels is back for another season. They have what's thought to be one of the better offensive lines in the SEC, if not maybe college football. They're going to be able to run the ball. And when I go back to, our concerns for Carolina this year, stopping the run is one of them. And if Elko can see on tape in the first 8-9 weeks of the season that Carolina is struggling to stop the run, then guess what? He's going to dial up probably for a lot of that game is a lot of running for A&M.
The big thing for them is, look, again, they put so much money into that program. There is no reason to believe why any big school in Texas, you talk about the big players out there in Texas, TCU, Baylor, those schools, Texas A&M and Texas in the SEC should always be competing for a national championship. That Lone Star Showdown should always have the implications that it did last year with the winner going to the SEC championship game. But I think the expectations for Texas A&M are going to be super high this year. And Elko is going to be fine, I think. I think he's eventually going to get that program figured out and get them on the right track. But you mentioned it at the beginning of this segment when we started talking about A&M. What is the ceiling for what Mike Elko can do at Texas A&M? Is it winning 10 games? Is it making a little bit of run at the college football playoff? We've seen this song and dance before with A&M over the years where they've had a lot of success, but it's never amounted to anything. They haven't gotten to an SEC championship. They've never made the playoff. And then, of course, they've never won a national championship. So expectations will be high this year, but I'm not expecting Texas A&M to go out there and blow all the doors off,
So now we get to the final team of the regular season. They need no introduction, of course. We're talking about Clemson and Dabo Swinney. And I think it goes without saying this is the most, I don't want to say scary, because you're not afraid of Dabo Swinney. The head coach you're always the most concerned with for what he's accomplished and what he's capable of, especially with how good of a roster they have this year. And, again, you look at every prognostication, they're thought of to be a team that's seriously in the mix to win the national championship. And it's hard to argue with that. And, look, Dabo would love nothing more than the I told you so of getting to the end of the regular season, capping off, a 12-0 or 11-1 campaign before going to play for the ACC championship and being able to say, told you guys, I'm going to build the team the way I want to build my team, and we're still going to have success.
It's a very talented roster, this group this year. It feels like Clemson's got that mojo, that swagger that they had in the mid-2010s when they finally won a national championship for the first time since '81. And obviously they won 2 over Alabama in the late 2010s. But, since then it's been a little bit up and down ever since they lost to LSU in the national championship, going for a third one under Dabo. But this team, I think they got the talent more so this year than others to go ahead and do that. Obviously, they're highly ranked going into the year. The one real spot, it feels like they just don't have the same type of production returning, because, again, they are returning so much for this season, is running back. What is the running back position going to look like? But, again, this should be a really good passing offense with Cade Klubnik, those really talented receivers you have coming back. And then in the defense, so much good stuff they got going on defense with guys like Peter Woods, TJ Parker, guys like that are really, really good players out there for them. How
badly do you think it keeps Shane Beamer up at night that he has not beaten Dabo Swinney in Williams-Brice Stadium yet? If at all. Maybe it doesn't bother him. I don't know.
I would say as we get towards that game, it becomes like it creeps into your mind a little bit, because these coaches are thinking about the first game on the schedule. I can probably guarantee they're not thinking about, oh man, I haven't beaten this guy in so long when we play them at the end of the year. When the time comes, it's probably going to be scratching at his mind, like, hey, I've beaten him twice on the road. I'm 2-0 at Clemson, but you haven't won yet at home. And South Carolina in general hasn't won the rivalry game at home since 2013. It's been 12 years. And again, if this feels like it could be the year, but you really have a talented Clemson team that will be coming in.
Yeah, there are, children in middle school now that don't remember that or weren't alive the last time that Carolina beat, Clemson in Williams-Brice Stadium, and we certainly hope that that changes this year.
Yeah, not many of them probably got to see the 5-peat of beating Clemson 5 years in a row. So we'll see if this can become the year, and it's an important year for both programs, and one where I think the expectations are going to be that game has playoff implications at the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Dabo Swinney, without question, is the toughest coaching challenge you're going to have this year. His track record speaks for itself. But again, Coach Beamer's shown in at least 2 out of the last 3 years the ability to take down what many people may have thought were better Clemson teams in both those instances. So we'll see if that happens this upcoming year. But there's your spin around the coaches for Carolina to face this upcoming year out of the Power 4 ranks. And again, it just underlines how tough of a challenge this entire season is going to be.
It's going to be tough, but it will certainly be a fun one to watch.
Absolutely. Well, Jack, got to let you bounce. Appreciate you filling in once again this week, and we'll be right back into it come Monday morning.
All right, man. I'll see you Monday, 2 hours, 9 to 11. Let's do it.
Looking forward to it. And yes, Jack will be joining me from 9 to 11 every single morning from the Extra Point starting next week and going forward. So looking forward to that. But I'm riding with Solo for the next hour and a half. We have finally gotten the NCAA sanctions against Michigan coming out this afternoon. We'll dive into what those are and what exactly that means for the Michigan program coming up next as the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina rolls along. Tyler Head, Captain Ed Bear producing on the other side of the glass on your Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head along with you, Ed Burr producing on the other side of the glass as we wrap up your week here on this Friday. We were waiting for it. It seems like it's been a long time coming, but the NCAA has finally announced their sanctions against the University of Michigan, going back to the Connor Salians sign-stealing saga from 2 years ago, which, by the way, it feels like a lot longer than that. I guess with how much news and how many things have changed in college football over the course of the past 2 years, it feels like it was a lot longer ago that we were talking about this. And I remember, because it was like mid-October, I think, Michigan was on its way to, I believe, play maybe Wisconsin that upcoming weekend, and then all this stuff starts coming out, and it was unbelievable, right? The wildness of the story of this guy and this rogue Michigan staff member going out there and using his military tactics to steal the signs of other teams, and allegedly being on the sidelines of the Central Michigan game with the recording glasses on and all those kind of things. It was crazy, but it ended up being true in a lot of ways, that he was sending people to games with filming equipment and all that kind of stuff that got Michigan in hot water in the first place. Now, at the end of the day, they obviously went on to still win the national championship, so that did not slow them down by any means with all the controversy surrounding that. But the NCAA has finally wrapped up its investigation, and the penalties that have been given to Michigan include 4 years probation. They will have financial penalties of a $50,000 fine plus 10% of the budget for the football program. They'll have a fine equivalent of 10% of the scholarships awarded to Michigan football for this upcoming calendar year. They'll have a 25% reduction in football official visits during the upcoming year, a 14-week probation on recruiting communications in the football program during the probation period. And this is where things get to the details that really matter at the end of the day. Who's getting punished? What's being taken away? What's not going to happen anymore? Those kind of things. We start off with Sharon Moore. Sharon Moore has been given a 2-year show cause in which he is suspended for a total of 3 games. Now, Michigan's already given him a 2-game suspension already for, I believe, Central Michigan and Nebraska, which is weeks number 3 and 4. And it says here that the panel determined that a suspension for 1 additional game was appropriate. So, and the objective for Michigan self-imposing those penalties against themselves back earlier on this year with Sharon Moore was to hopefully do enough to where the NCAA would say, all right, you've already punished yourself. We won't add any more to that. But they're going to add at least 1 more game for this upcoming season. One more. The 2 games for this year will count, and they will also be suspended for the first game of the 26-27 season. And it says, apart from 3-game suspension, Moore is not prohibited from engaging in coaching or other athletically related activities during the show cause period. So again, he's still the coach. This isn't enough to get him fired or anything like that. So kind of a slap on the wrist at the end of the day. And then you have the additional show causes, which include Connor Stallions, which is an 8-year, which restricts him from all athletically related activities during the show cause period. Jim Harbaugh, who has a 10-year show cause restricting him from all athletically related activities during the show cause period, which will begin on August 7th, 2028, at the conclusion of his prior 4-year show cause from a previous case. And then Denard Robinson, if you forgot, the former Michigan quarterback, was also a staffer on that team. He's been given a 3-year show cause restricting him from all athletic-related activities during the show cause period. What does all this mean? I know I kind of throw a lot of that out there at you. Not a whole lot, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't really change much. Yes, they faced penalties, so to speak, but nothing that is going to tear the program down. Nothing where the world's going to be falling apart around them. Like, they're, for the most part, getting off relatively clean here. And look, the NCAA said a couple years ago that they were going to stop taking banners away, right? Taking down, stripping you of your, championships and accomplishments and those kind of things. So knowing that heading into this investigation, I think we all understood that that was probably not going to happen in this case either, right? Where I think everybody looked and said, man, Michigan, they're coming for that banner. Look, we may have even said that ourselves here, but that's not the way the NCAA seems to operate anymore. Now it's more about hurting you financially, right? And when you look at the value of $50,000, that can go a long way, right? Now, like Michigan's raking in millions upon millions, so I doubt that's going to be too much of a deterrent. But when it comes to these kind of penalties, money is where you really got to hit teams at now, right? Because it's all about the money, especially in a revenue sharing era where the money that you're being fined could directly come out of the fund, the pot, whatever you want to call it, of the money that you would be paying your players with now through revenue sharing. So programs don't want to affect that as much as possible, so they can have those guarantees of who's going to be or how the money's going to be allocated towards their student athletes. So again, this was a crazy story that was fun to follow, and again, we had plenty of fun with it here when it was happening back in 2023. But as time went on, you see the reporting, all those kind of things. It seemed like at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff was going to be a slap on the wrist, and I don't know. I guess we were expecting maybe the NCAA would bring the hammer down on them. What that would have looked like exactly, I don't know. But it doesn't really seem like this is going to affect Michigan too much going forward. And they're still going to be thought of as one of the better programs in college football. Yeah, last year was a little bit of a dip after Harbaugh left and all that kind of stuff. But, they have a very talented roster. They have a young quarterback in Bryce Underwood, who I don't believe has been named the starter yet. Jack and I got fooled on whatever day that was, maybe Wednesday this week, when Nakos of On3 tweeted out about a former Michigan quarterback starting at San Diego State this upcoming year. And the way he tweeted out is confusing and almost made you think he was still there, but not the case. Look, Bryce Underwood is a five-star kid and got paid millions of dollars to come to Michigan for a reason, because they think he's the savior of that offense. We'll have to see, right? It's, we've seen plenty of five-star quarterbacks come in and light the world on fire, and plenty of them as well that have come in and struggled pretty much immediately. And we're going to find out a lot about Bryce Underwood early in the season as Michigan tries to navigate its way through its tough Big Ten slate. They also got Oklahoma in week number 2. And that was the funny thing about Sherrone Moore and the self-imposed suspension was, most teams would probably be like, all right, you're suspended for 2 games. Let's just seat you out the first 2 games of the regular season. Not the case here. He opted for weeks number 3 and 4, which I think that means they probably viewed those 2 matchups as the easiest games of the entire year or 2 of the easier games of the entire year for Michigan. One of those is Nebraska. And if I can't even imagine, but Matt Rule is probably plastering that everywhere. Like, look, Sherrone Moore thinks he doesn't even need to be on the sidelines for Michigan to beat you. How's that going to fire you up? Those kind of things. But, there's your penalties, I guess we can call it, for Michigan, that, again, those things do have an effect. But from a audience standpoint, we're never going to really see any difference, right? Sherrone Moore won't be standing on the sidelines for a couple games. That's whatever. But, yeah, Michigan, I think, by all accounts, considering what we thought maybe could happen, got up relatively clean. And they'll once again be a team that's going to be talked about in the mix for making the college football playoff and trying to get another college football playoff national championship. We'll come back. We will wrap up the hour. This week is the 10-year anniversary of a very significant moment when it comes to quotes and Steve Spurrier. I'll let you hear that coming up next as the halftime show presented by the Men's Clinic for South Carolina rolls on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, along with you. We're brought to you by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina, by the way. Wrapping up hour number 2. Coming up at the top of the 2 o'clock hour. Earlier on this morning, myself, Wes, and Chris, we spoke with Brett Cianchia of Pick 6 Previews, which is another preseason magazine, much like the Phil Steele magazine is. Got his thoughts on South Carolina as well as other things going on around the college football world for this upcoming year. We'll replay that conversation for you coming up at the top of the 2 o'clock hour. But I wanted to get to this as we wrap up hour number 2 because I was scrolling through Twitter earlier on this week, and I came across a legendary Steve Spurrier clip that happened on This Week 10 years ago. Cut number 4 here, Ed. This is Coach Steve Spurrier giving a take that he says reporters don't typically hear when asking coaches about how fall camp is going.
Another sorry practice today. These guys, I don't know if we're going to be able to beat anybody this year. Quarterbacks, they can't hit the broadside of a barn right now. I don't know if we could hit that indoor facility right there. Receivers, they couldn't catch a cold if it was the middle of February, dropping everything. Defensive backs, gosh, I wonder why they got grass stains all over the jerseys. They fall about every play. About 2 or 3 of them are falling. And our kickers, gee, it's like the Army, left, right. They're kicking it all over the place. I don't know if we can beat anybody this year. Guys, and leadership, no, we don't have any leaders out here. Guys are soft. They just can't. I don't know. Maybe I ought to give them a week off and start over and see if we can regroup and find some real tough guys out here. But it's been a struggle this preseason. It's been a big struggle, man. I don't know how we're going to be. Have you ever heard a coach say that?
Oh, a classic Spurrier moment. And for the context, if you've never heard the full clip, he comes over to the reporters there and says, hey, you're used to coaches saying, this and that in fall camp. Let's do something a little bit different, and gave that famous rant that makes its rounds seemingly about every single year. But that did happen 10 years ago, and obviously we didn't know at the time that was going to be his last fall camp as the coach here at Carolina before walking away from the team a little bit later on that season. But like many things with Spurrier, we think about the quotes, right? And he's somebody that was never afraid, never shy in front of a microphone, and said whatever came to his mind, right? Whatever came out of his mouth. And that was a classic example of that. And it got us talking earlier about the, some of the best quotes in college football from coaches over the years. And there was a few that do stand out to me. And I got to go with my favorite, the all-time classic. We all know it. We all love it. Cut number 7 here, Ed. This one from now, hard to believe, 18 years ago.
That's why I don't read the newspaper. Because it's garbage. And the editor that let it come out is garbage. Attacking an amateur athlete for doing everything right. And then you want to write articles about guys that don't do things right and downgrade them, the ones that do make plays. Are you kidding me? Where are we at in society today? Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40. I'm not a kid. Write something about me or our coaches. Don't write about a kid that does everything right, that's heart's broken, and then say that the coaches said he was scared. That ain't true.
The classic Mike Gundy rant of I'm a man, I'm 40. Again, 18 years ago. He's now 58 or about to be 58, one of those two. That's hard to believe. That's crazy. I posed the question earlier. Has the rant superseded what he's done on the field? And look, he's coached a lot of good Oklahoma State teams, right? Big 12 championships, big bowl games, all that kind of stuff. Never made the playoff, but he's had that Oklahoma State program in a good spot for a lot of years. Last year was obviously a big downer. Last year going 3-9, but they're usually a really good, consistent team. But I feel like the rant is the thing that people think about more than anything else when you think about Mike Gundy. And in a way, I feel like that's kind of, I don't want to say defines his legacy, but it's what people point to more than anything else when they say, hey, tell me something about Mike Gundy. Oh, well, he's the guy that did the I'm a man, I'm 40 rant back in 2007, as opposed to, oh, he had X amount of Big 12 championships or this amount of 10-win seasons, all those kind of things. especially for somebody that's been around as long as he has and accomplished what he has, that clip right there, that I'm a man, I'm 40 from 18 years ago, which is still crazy to think about, is what really comes to people's minds first, more often than not, when I feel like they think of Coach Gundy. And real quick, Ed, one more. Cut number 6. I can't talk about Coach Quotes without talking about the GOAT of Coach Quotes, that being Mike Leach.
You've lost your inner pirate. Sword. Have you ever heard swing your sword? You're supposed to swing your sword like this. You're swinging yours like this. I mean, you've got to find your inner pirate. A lot of times things just happen for a reason. We don't know why God wants it that way, but you can't make the best out of it until you get back your inner pirate. You might be the luckiest man alive and not even know it.
Oh, the great Mike Leach. That was from Friday Night Lights, by the way, but I like to think that he walked on set that day. Instead of handing him a script, they're like, hey, just say whatever you feel like. And we've heard the pirate references over the years from Coach Leach as well, and we certainly miss him in today's world of college sports because, man, there was never a dull moment with him. I even went down a rabbit hole of watching a Mike Leach compilation last night after pulling some of these clips because he was just so darn good at any time he got in front of a microphone. 2 hours in the books, one more hour to go. Again, we're going to re-rack the conversation with Brett Ciancia. Pick 6 previews coming up next as the halftime show rolls along, presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. It's our head with you on your Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here, flying solo with you on your Fridays. We get into the final hour. Of course, Jay and Terry coming up with the post-game show today from 3 until 6. I want to remind you once again as we start this hour, this time next week, going to be out the Games Summer Golf Classic, sponsored by Krager Showrooms, formerly known as the Nest in the Vista. Next Friday, August 22nd at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Tee time's at 9. Registration will begin, as always, at 7:30 that morning. We're going to have the onion sausages for breakfast, which are delicious. I had a lot of those last year. The mimosa bar from Saki's Wine and Spirits also going to be out there, as well as delicious Firehouse subs for lunch. We're going to have prizes to give away, and the golf gun makes its return. If you want to take part, it's only $400 for a team. Give Charwood a call at 803-755-2000 and press the number 2 to sign up again for the Game Summer Golf Classic, sponsored by Krager Showrooms. Earlier on today, on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, myself, Wes, and Chris, we had Brett Ciancia on from Pick Six Previews. He has his own preview magazine, much like Phil Steele does each and every year. And we got his thoughts and opinions on not only South Carolina, but also other teams and the storylines going on around college football. And we started off here locally with Carolina, and given the fact that they were 13th in the AP poll, we talked about a lot of people having them very highly, but also notable people like Brett McMurphy and Reese Davis not even ranking them in their top 25. And I asked Brett for his thoughts on where he views South Carolina ahead of this season starting.
Hey, well, thanks for having me on. It's a busy time of year. It's magazine season. We have the 14th annual Pick Six Previews magazine going out, and everyone's optimistic this time of year. I think it's two parts. Last year's special season for South Carolina, they were one of the hottest teams in the country last November. People were stumping for them for the playoff, and rightfully so. They went out and beat Clemson, a huge achievement for the program. But looking forward to 2025, it's going to be tough to repeat for me. I'm more in that Brett McMurphy, Reese Davis camp. It's such a deep conference. I have so much respect for this league that when you sign a top 25 recruiting class, it's not even keeping up with the Joneses down here. It's unbelievable. So just the sheer talent in this conference finds me fading South Carolina a little bit. I love that quarterback with Lenora Sellers. I love what you have there. But replacing a lot of stars. Rocket Sanders, the 1,000-yard back, is gone. A lot of the interior defensive line is gone. The Nagurski winner there is gone. So questions. But, South Carolina is going to be a tough out, and it's just such a deep conference.
Hey, Brett, it's Wes. Appreciate you hopping on, man. Congrats on the magazine, coming out again this year. And let's keep it right there with the SEC. Who do you have as the favorites this year? And then, maybe who do you have kind of maybe surprising or just being a little bit better than the average person thinks?
Yeah, well, appreciate that hype for the magazine. I have Texas and Alabama playing in Atlanta. I know a lot of people will go Georgia there, but what we have in Alabama, I think, is being overlooked. They're still number one in the country in the 5-year recruiting average. They have the most 5-stars on their 2-deep. I put out my advanced rosters this week. 13 5-stars on their 2-deep. That's probably more than the whole ACC has combined. So they're extremely talented over at Alabama. And I like their move bringing Ryan Grubb. He was the offensive mastermind behind Washington's run with Michael Penix, along with DeBoer. So now you're getting the real DeBoer experience. It's year 2. I think it's one of the best teams in the country. So I have them playing Texas in Atlanta. And then for a surprise team, I'll give you 2, and they might be tampered by their hard schedules, but I like what's happening in Florida and Oklahoma. I think with Billy Napier, it goes to show you how quickly a program can change in a few months. They wanted him out of town in November. He goes out, he wins a couple games, gets everybody to come back to Gainesville for 25, and now they're a really strong team. And same with Oklahoma. I think they repaired their offensive problem by bringing in John Mateer from Washington State with his coordinator, with his young ace coordinator. So 2 really, really strong teams. But look at those schedules, guys. It's an absolute gauntlet. They both face 7 ranked teams. I mean, you got some teams in the Big Ten that are playing too. So it's just a whole different beast down here in the SEC.
Brett, let's go to the other side of that. So you mentioned some teams that you're maybe high on to exceed expectations. Are there any teams out there that you're not as much of a believer in, that maybe you're getting some preseason hype? You can say that for the SEC, but expand it out nationally if you want to.
Yeah, for sure. I'll give you one here in the SEC, and that's Tennessee. I came into this preview magazine process. It's a one-man show. I do all 68 teams. And for Tennessee, what I thought was going to be the storyline was their offensive line changing, and maybe if they can get more vertical passing. And then all of a sudden the Nico drama hits, and now you just have an offense totally broken down. It's going to be 10 new starters on this offense, so much change on that side of the ball. So I'm fading Tennessee in the SEC. But on the national scale, I'll say this: I'm not making many friends in Champaign, Illinois this year because they're coming in as one of the preseason darlings. I saw them number 12 in the AP poll. And again, special year for them last year. South Carolina fans got to see it up close in the bowl game. It was a solid coaching job by Brett Bielema, but I think they kind of hit their ceiling last year with this roster. My advanced numbers, my stats, they don't look like a top 10 team at all. In fact, my numbers had them 35th in the country last year, 32nd this year. It's nowhere close to where they are, 12th in the AP. So I have them down at 7-5 for the year, nowhere near this dark horse talk that we're hearing.
And we're talking to Brett Ciancia of Pick Six Previews here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Let's go back to South Carolina for a second here. You mentioned that you're on your profile. It mentions you're a Heisman voter, and Sellers is somebody that's getting a lot of Heisman hype in this offseason. What would a Heisman Trophy-like season look like for the North Sellers? Maybe not necessarily just stats, but as far as moments and things that he would need to accomplish to warrant that in your eyes.
Yeah, well, unfortunately with the award, it really comes down to a lot of teams that are on playoff contending teams. That's just how it's been. That just means you're in bigger moments. I know last year might have been the exception with Travis Hunter, but for the most part, these are teams that into November, they are in top 10 games. They're in conference championships. Just they have the national eye on them. So I think for Lenora Sellers, and look, he's electric. I love watching him. He's already done it last year. If he can put together more of those highlight plays, but more importantly, if South Carolina as a team is in the SEC hunt there in November, something like that, and they have huge moments against, say he goes off against Oklahoma and Alabama, or in Death Valley at LSU or in College Station. So he's got plenty of national stages there. Part of it is a team award. You're gonna have, you're not gonna win it on a 4-8 or a 5-7 team. You got to win some of these ball games and be in the top 25 and be in the SEC race. So. But on an individual level, he's certainly got it. I mean, he's electric. He's going to get you not 1,000 yards, but maybe 500 yards rushing, key spots, key third down scrambles, efficient passing the ball. So yeah, he's definitely a candidate, and I think you see that reflected on the Heisman odds there. It's really a deep field this year, but he's got his name in the ring.
Hey, Brett, I was looking through the magazine before we came on, and was kind of looking for some South Carolina specific things. If I'm reading this right, it looks like your metrics have South Carolina pretty high up there in terms of player development over the last few years. I think 6th in the country. What can you tell us about that and just kind of what goes into that? And then, if you will, what are some other just kind of unique things you have going on with the magazine that people might like?
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing up the player development. I think that's key because a lot of people will cover recruiting, and that's certainly important. That's the backbone of a program, but they might stop there. I think you got to have the recruiting, and then what else happens on those 4 years on campus? You got to have coaching schemes that work. You got to recruit to your schemes, and then you got to develop the talent. You got to develop your players and send them to the pros. So what that number does is it compares South Carolina's recruiting rankings on paper from the high school ranks, and then compares it to actual NFL draft output. And you're seeing that this staff with Shane Beamer, they're churning out pros above expectation. So excellent job with development there. I'll say that when I first started Pick Six Previews, it was kind of the opposite with South Carolina. They were on the bad end of that formula. So great job by flipping the script and getting them into the pros. Some other unique things, well, I have my game grader formula. It sounds nerdy, but it's just a numerical way to grade these teams. And I think what people like about my magazine is it's a mix of numbers and also narrative. I mean, I'm able to put it into words, no acronyms. It's all color-coded for the stats. It's easy to access, easy to read. So that's good. One new thing I put in there this year is everyone knows high school recruiting and transfer recruiting, but I put a bar graph in there for mock NFL draft picks because you want to see where all these future pros are. So I know it's early for a mock draft, but you can clearly see what schools have the most pros for next year or projected pros for next year. So, yeah, all kinds of stuff. Go check it out, picksixpreviews.com. We got samples up there, shipping out next day, so you get the hard copy right away. But now, thanks for plugging that. I appreciate it.
Brett, a couple more minutes here. And so just obviously you mentioned earlier that you are not as high on South Carolina with your data, with your research than some others. However, if you look back a few years since you've been doing this, are there any trends that you can identify for maybe what teams did or maybe how they were able to exceed expectations? Maybe would it be, having a quarterback like a Lenore Sellers who can kind of carry a team? Are there any trends you've identified when that happens?
Well, yeah, recruiting's huge, and now this transfer portal era, transfers are huge. One thing, talking to head coaches, talking to coordinators, it's player retention. It used to be they talk about how hard recruiting is. Now they say the first people they're recruiting are their own players. They need to go re-recruit the whole starting lineup every December just to try and keep them in the building. It's unbelievable. So I would say player retention is huge. I like looking at coaching stability and coordinator stability, because some of these programs where they're hiring, firing, it just doesn't work out. You want to give it time to build. South Carolina has done that with Beamer. And then coordinator stability. Clayton White, one of the best in the country, so underrated. No one talks about him in discussions of defensive coordinators, but he continues to stack top 25 caliber defenses. Last year, no different. They were number 13 in the country for me on defense. So I think a lot of that. I mean, recruiting, transfers, player retention, and then coordinator coach stability. So that's how I'd answer that question. But so much goes into it. It's really a holistic approach to try and preview these teams anymore with all the player movement. But I think we accomplished that here in the magazine.
Got about 60 more seconds here before we have to run into our break. But in the past 20 years, the national champion has been ranked in the top 7 of the AP poll 18 out of 20 times. You see that being the case once again this year?
Yeah, I do. Now, it's a crowded field at the top, but those are your top brands. I mean, you have superpower recruiters with Bama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State. You can even call Oregon a powerhouse recruiter. And then you've got a veteran team with Penn State that I think could really make a run, as well as, I hate to say here on Carolina radio, but Clemson. They fit the mold of a national champion. All those returning starters, all those future NFL draft picks. They're number 2 in the 2026 mock NFL draft, number of prospects. So it's a pro-caliber team at Clemson. So, yeah, it's a mix of these super recruiters and then 2 veteran teams, Penn State and Clemson. So I think the champ is coming from that pack of teams.
Well, it should be a fun season ahead, Brett. We appreciate your hard work on the Preview Magazine and can't wait to see what unfolds here starting in a couple weeks.
Oh, absolutely. Best time of year, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Again, Brett Ciancia of Pick 6 Previews there joining us on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour. It's Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris on your Friday on the game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here on your Friday on the Game. Coming up at 2:30, going to be talking with Alex Kirshner of Split Zone Duo podcast. His thoughts on South Carolina and college football as a whole. So looking forward to that coming up here in a couple minutes. Also, I mentioned this earlier today, but I'll bring it up once again. If you did not see on our YouTube channel at the Game TV Radio, yesterday, Christopher Bell, NASCAR driver for Joe Gibbs Racing, came by the studio. He was on his way down to throw out the first pitch at the Columbia Fireflies game, and sat down with him for about 25 minutes. We talked about Darlington, what's going on with this NASCAR season, some future things in NASCAR as well. Real good conversation. If you want to check that out, it's on our YouTube channel at the Game TV Radio. As always, sponsored by Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. So check that out if you get some time. I touched on this in the last hour, but if you're just tuning in, I'll go back over it again. Michigan has been handed out its punishments for the Connor Stallions sign stealing scandal from the 2023 season. And I went over what the penalties actually are, but I feel like it's worth expanding a little bit because we do have the numbers that reflect what exactly is going to happen from the monetary standpoint when it comes to Michigan and their penalties. And these are all per Pete Thamel of ESPN, put them out on Twitter earlier on today when the penalties were announced. So from a monetary fine standpoint, $50,000 plus 10% of the budget of the football program. Now, that equates out to about $7.2 million per Pete Thamel because last year's football budget ended up being $72 million. They also have a 2-year postseason fine that's expected to be around $20 million, though they could end up with more than $25 million if the revenue changes for the college ball playoff in 2026. They were also awarded a fine for 10% of scholarships awarded, which is going to be around $800,000. So this does hit Michigan significantly in the pocket when you look at the fine equivalent to the anticipated loss of all postseason competition revenue with the 2025 and 2026 football seasons, which could net out to about $10 million both this year and next year. So that's where you do have to hit these programs now is with the fines to the wallet, essentially, which is what the NCAA is going after here. And that's in addition to the other things that come along with this, which is a 25% reduction in football official visits, a 14-week prohibition of recruiting communications in the football program during the probation period, as well as show causes for Connor Stallions, Jim Harbaugh, Denard Robinson, as well as an extra game added on to Sharon Moore's suspension, which was already self-imposed at 2 games for games 3 and 4 this season, which Michigan self-imposed that on themselves all the way back in May, with the hope and anticipation that when the NCAA announced its suspension, or announced its findings and punishments, they were going to look at that 2-game self-imposed suspension and say, okay, that's enough. We won't add anything more to that. He's also going to have to sit out the first game of the 2026 season, so coming up next year. So the total suspension length is 3 total games, 2 of those being the ones that he's already sitting out this year, and then 1 more coming up next year. But the real big thing here is the money. And again, that is a significant hit to the pocketbook of Michigan, though I feel like with how strong of an alumni base they have, with how strong their collective is, I mean, look at Bryce Underwood and the money that he's getting paid to be there at quarterback this upcoming or for the next couple of years. I don't think Michigan's going to have a problem generating the revenue to pay these fines and still having enough to obviously have the allotment for revenue sharing as well as NIL. So I think they come out of this fine. I feel like this is also one of those kind of things because typically when we look at, unless you start like pulling scholarships, which is not happening here, they're getting a fine based on the money allotted for scholarships. unless you start taking scholarships away, saying, all right, you're going to have a 25% reduction in scholarships for X amount of years, then I don't think you really affect what happens going forward. And by the way, for Sharon Moore, just because he's not there for the game on Saturday doesn't mean he can't be involved in the practice and game planning for the week, I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly, from a self-imposed ban from earlier on this year. So Michigan isn't going to look any different. Yeah, you're going to have somebody else on the sidelines, running the game that weekend, but it's still the same Michigan team. As long as they have the talent on the field, they'll be fine, much like 2 years ago en route to their national championship, when you may have forgotten, Jim Harbaugh had 6 total games in that regular season that he, through self-imposed bans, was sitting out of, that they still proceeded to win every single one of them en route to the national championship. And Sharon Moore was the interim coach for those games, or for at least a couple of those games. And he had the famous, moment where he cried on camera, I blank and love you, coach, and all that kind of stuff. Now I guess the shoe's kind of on the other foot, so somebody else is going to have to be that fill-in guy for Sharon Moore. But like at the end of the day, and yes, the money's a lot. Michigan's going to be fine. This isn't going to suddenly turn them into a program that can't make bowl games. Like, they're going to be okay. And it kind of ends this long saga of the past 2 years of seeing what would become of the bizarre story, because it was so wild, right? Of this Michigan staffer using military training to try and obtain other teams' signs through nefarious purposes of sending people to other games and being on the sideline for Central Michigan and all these kind of crazy things. That was a fun story to follow because how ridiculous it was. And we were curious to see what punishments and findings would happen. And Sharon Moore allegedly deleted these text messages when the investigations were going on, which is why he's being punished for his involvement in that. But again, at the end of the day, it's not something that's going to derail the program. Michigan's going to be fine. I don't know if they're going to be a playoff contending team this year, but if they can continue to recruit well and develop talent, then they should have no problems finding themselves in the mix as being one of the better teams in the Big Ten for years to come. And you forget, they ended last year really strong with the win against Ohio State and then beating Alabama in the bowl game. So it's going to be interesting to see how they potentially carry that momentum in this upcoming year. And we're still waiting to see if Bryce Underwood's actually going to be the starter for game number 1, as he's in competition there with a ton of guys in that quarterback room. And obviously, when you're paying him as much as he's getting paid, you would think he'd be the starter, but still has to win the job at the end of the day. And we'll see if that happens. They open up with New Mexico coming up in week number 1. And again, always got plenty of challenges to the Big Ten slate, but outside of the 2 games, weeks 3 and 4, they will have Sharon Moore on the sidelines as their head coach. We'll dive back into talking about South Carolina and touch on other things going on around the college football world on the other side with Alex Kirshner of the Split Zone Duo podcast, set to join me on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines as the halftime show, which is sponsored by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina, rolls on your Friday. Tyler Head along with you here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Halftime Show, sponsored by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Tyler Head, along with you on your Friday, flying solo here on The Game. Happy to be joined now on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines from the Split Zone Duo podcast, Alex Kirshner. Alex, first of all, appreciate you taking your time, and might I congratulate you as well for getting married in the past weeks. Hopefully the married life is treating you well so far.
You know, it's been fun. It's a great institution, marriage. I have been looking at it for a long time, and it's great to finally be in the game myself. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so hopefully that's going well, and I imagine it was critical to have the wedding right before football season started, so you don't run into that fall wedding thing that everybody finds controversial.
You're exactly right. I, as a person who has worked in college football my entire career, have no problem with fall weddings. In my opinion, there will always be another college football Saturday. Your friend or whoever hopefully will not have another wedding. You should pick the college football Saturday only in cases where you really don't want to go to the wedding for other reasons. But, you know, enough of my good friends work in the industry that I figured it would help them out if we did not get married on a college football Saturday.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably appreciate that. And, again, congratulations. A lot to get into here for the next 10 minutes or so, including talking about the Sports Podcasting Festival that's coming up next weekend, which we'll get some details on that coming up here in a minute. But I want to start off talking about South Carolina, 13th in the AP poll earlier on this week. And we've talked about this all week long. Obviously, you have enough votes to get that high in the AP poll, but some high-profile people like Brett McMurphy and Reese Davis leaving them out of that top 25, which I think kind of illustrates how back and forth a lot of national people are on this team. Yes, you have Sellers on one side, you have Dylan Stewart on the other, but a lot of questions everywhere else that we have here locally as well as people covering the sport nationally. So when you look at South Carolina, what's your kind of vibe on the team as we're 2 weeks away from the season starting?
You know, I think that you sum it up pretty well. There's no question about the top of the roster. It's a shockingly good top of the roster. Kind of makes you think a little bit about those old days with Lowney and Clattimore and Jeffrey and some of the really good Steve Spurrier teams. You know, we're all getting old, but at this point, a decade and change ago. I think that's clear. I do have some questions about everything else, and I even have some questions about, you know, is it going to be the same for Dylan Stewart when he doesn't have Kyle Kennard on the other side of the defensive line? I mean, that was one of the best edge rushing tandems in the country last year, and as incredible as Stewart was, and he's going to have a long career in the NFL, I think it probably helped him, probably limited the double teams that he saw to have a guy like Kennard on the other side. I like Brian Thomas a lot, player who's going to step up and probably replace Kennard opposite Stewart, so I think the pass rush isn't just going to be a one-man show. I think they're still going to have a good defensive front. I am interested, though, and I'm curious for your view of it, of, you know, what is the offensive playmaking going to look like aside from Lenora Sellers? You know, with Rocket Sanders being gone, that's a significant question. Juice Wells gone, not that he was not that he was there last year either. I believe he'd gone to Georgia at the beginning of the year. But I'm fumbling for the tight end, Josh Simon, who is gone, who was on the team last year. You know, there's a lot to replace. I know we're still kind of waiting for the Nick Harbor thing to happen and for his, like, incredible athletic measurables to convert into him actually being one of the best receivers in the country. So, you know, reasonable questions, but also reasons to be optimistic about all of those things.
And I'll say this from our perspective, and we talked about it a lot this entire offseason, having that entire offseason to work with those same group of receivers for the most part, we think is a very positive thing. Again, Nick Harbor's been this shiny object everybody's been looking at, waiting for him to really pop. And you saw him start to come along a little bit towards the end of last season. Now he's obviously spent the entire offseason focusing on football as opposed to splitting it with track, which we think is a very good thing. You got Mazio Bennett back. Jared Brown's coming back. Hopefully he can stay healthy. So you kind of have that same core of receivers, not to mention a ton of freshmen that people are really excited about coming in as well. So you hope they can kind of take what they did towards the end of last year and take several steps forward in the offseason to kind of hit the ground running when the season starts. I guess the biggest question, as it has been the past couple of years here, is the offensive line, right? You had the injuries 2 years ago. You had questionable play for most part last year where Sellers kind of made them look better than they were towards the end of last year. You hope that another year of development with a guy like Josiah Thompson, a right tackle, Casey Henry playing his first full season, or Josiah Thompson at left tackle, Casey Henry playing his first full season, not getting injured at right tackle, can go a long way. So we still have those same questions, but we're hoping, and then you add in Shula taking over the offensive play calling from Dow Loggins a year ago. We're hoping that all that coming together can form a good, nobody's expecting the number one offense in the country, but a respectable offense and go out there and get you some points and hopefully outpace whatever the defense is going to give up at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's an extremely reasonable way to think about this team. And, I appreciate that South Carolina, unlike certain teams in both the SEC and the Big Ten, well, most of them, is willing to challenge itself out of the gate with the Beamer Bowl, despite obviously having a Clemson game at the very end of the year every year, and to, go after things in a pretty aggressive way. I mean, you're playing a 10-game power conference schedule, I believe, and in my view, that should count for something if it's the first Sunday in December and this team is 9-3. It didn't count for enough last year in that case, obviously. But, I think this is a good team that is clearly going to challenge itself out of the chute, and I look forward to seeing it.
Again, talking to Alex Kirshner of the Split Zone Duo podcast here on the Halftime Show, sponsored by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Sticking with Carolina here for one more question. Earlier on this week, Pete Nakos of On3 put out an article about the most important non-quarterbacks in college football. Dylan Stewart ends up number 2 on that list between Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, of course, both at Ohio State. I feel like he was the most important non-quarterback to his own team's success, because you could remove Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, and Ohio State is still capable of winning a national championship. But you remove Dylan Stewart from this defense, and those questions become a whole lot more bigger if he's not there. Would you agree that maybe he's the most important for his individual team's success in terms of non-quarterbacks?
Man, up there. There's a handful of players who are on my mind in that regard this year. I think a bit about the center, Luke Pettibon from Wake Forest, who's playing at Florida State now. And, Florida State had one of the worst offensive lines that we've ever seen from a program of that stature last year. And so they bring in kind of a new captain of the offensive line to maybe try to save Mike Norvell's career. But, given the stakes of what we're talking about, and that I think South Carolina is going to kind of be right there on that collar of possible playoff teams, yeah, I think it's a very fair point. I mean, the difference between looking at South Carolina as a team that could be the 10 or 11 seed in the playoff and South Carolina as a team that wins 7 or 8 games is pretty substantial, and Dylan Stewart's probably responsible for a lot of that.
Let's look at the greater scope of college football. AP poll coming out this week. Penn State coming in at number 2 behind Texas. And when you look at all these other teams in that top 10 that we consider to be contenders, including Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, Notre Dame, Oregon, even Alabama, they're all replacing quarterbacks from a year ago. Penn State gets Drew Aller back. They get that double-headed monster of Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton in the backfield. Yeah, you lose Tyler Warren. Yeah, you lose Abdul Carter on the defensive side. But to me, it seems like if there was ever going to be a year where James Franklin finally breaks through and maybe wins a national championship, let alone just beats Ohio State and teams like that more consistently, this would be the year. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is the best shot that he's going to have. I think it's the best shot he's going to have for 2 reasons. One being where Penn State is in the talent cycle, and 2 being where, frankly, Ohio State and Michigan are in the talent cycle. I mean, Ohio State is going to be great. Ohio State is great every year. It's impossible for Ohio State not to be great. You or I could coach that team, and they would probably go 9-3 at least. But this is probably a step-back year for them, just given the shape of the roster. Yeah, I mean, they still got Jeremiah Smith. They still got Caleb Downs. But a lot of changes. They've got a quarterback battle that's stretched deep into the summer here. And you look at Penn State, and you look at, pretty much other than Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren, most of your favorite Penn State players from the last couple of years are still here. And I should also point out the left tackle, Olaf Ashanu, as well, who's really important to them. Other than those 3, your favorite Penn State Nittany Lion is probably still on this team. And, that's reason to be pretty excited. I agree. I think it is reason to think that if they're ever going to get over the hump, it should probably be right now.
Again, talking to Alex Kirshner of the Split Zone Duo podcast. Last year, Indiana, SMU, and Arizona State surprised everybody by jumping into the college football playoff. Who's the team that could be the surprise this year?
It's tough. it's hard to spot surprises this year. I will say that I was going to answer this question with Illinois. I was going to say that the Illinois Fighting Illini are an interesting under-the-radar playoff team, but then I think the AP people kind of blew up my spot by ranking them 12th, right ahead of South Carolina. So I don't think that's a very edgy view anymore. Texas Tech is interesting to me as a possible playoff team, but again, underrated doesn't really work there because of all the money that they spent on their transfer portal class over the offseason, so they've gotten plenty of pub. I would talk about Oklahoma in the same way, but Oklahoma, given everything that they got in the transfer portal over the course of the offseason with John Mateer, with Jaden Ott, among others. I'm really answering this poorly, but I'll give you one that's outside of the top 25. I actually think that USC could be pretty interesting this year.
Okay.
I think USC, if the quarterback Jaden Mayava makes the leap under Lincoln Riley's tutelage in the way that so many quarterbacks have, and I think Lincoln tends to believe in him because he had him on the bench for most of last year and was willing to promote him at the end of the season and then stick with him. If that quarterback is good, I think you're going to see a better USC defense than we've seen under Lincoln Riley. And I think their skill position talent and their offensive line are going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in USC. And I'll also mention Louisville out of the ACC.
Last 60 seconds here, as I mentioned, Sports Podcasting Festival, which is coming up next weekend in Raleigh, that you guys are going to be a big featured part of once again. Tell people where they can get their information and tickets for that.
Yeah, we would absolutely love to see you. It's going to be week 0 Saturday, the 23rd, at the Rialto in Raleigh. Great theater. If you go to therialto.com, you can find your tickets there. There's going to be us, my co-hosts, Stephen Godfrey and Richard Johnson, handful of other shows. If you use the code SZD, as in Split Zone Duo, you get 25% off your ticket. And yeah, it's going to be a great night. We want to make sure the room is full, so there's a handful of tickets left. We'd love for you to snap them up and see you at the Rialto on Saturday. It's going to be a blast.
That's going to be fun, and this should be another fun season of college football. I love your guys' show and can't wait to listen as the weeks go by.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
He is Alex Kirshner of Split Zone Duo. We'll come back and we'll wrap up today's edition of the Halftime Show. Tyler Head along with you here on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here on your Friday. Wrapping things up before handing things over to Jay and Terry for the post-game show as your Friday rolls along here. Again, a reminder, this time next week, we're going to be out at the game's Summer Golf Classic, sponsored by Krager Showrooms, formerly the Nest in the Vista, out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. Tee time's at 9. Registration will begin at 7:30 that morning. You can join us for some delicious onion sausages for breakfast, the mimosa bar provided by Saki's Wine and Spirits, as well as Firehouse Subs being provided for lunch. We'll have prizes to give away, as well as the golf gun making its return. If you want to be a part of it, it's only $400 for a team. Give Charwood a call at 803-755-2000 and press the number 2 to sign up. I wanted to hit on this before I get out of here. I did mention it earlier on this morning, but Trey Wallace of Outkick kind of had this thread on Twitter yesterday of some interesting, or 2 days ago now, excuse me, of some interesting game day experiences that various Power 4 programs are selling. And the one that really caught the attention was the first one he listed, where at Oklahoma for the Michigan game in week number 2, they are selling access to be a part of the post-game press conference, or at least in the room for it, right? So for $692.11, that matters apparently, you and one guest get exclusive post-game media access where you can see real-time reactions unfold. Hear OU coaches and players address reporters moments after the final whistle. Watch the story take shape through the questions, the insights, and the atmosphere that set the headlines. This does not allow you to ask questions. This does not allow you to be involved in the post-game press conference. You're just there in the room. So if you're a diehard Oklahoma fan, you can say, hey, I was 30 feet away from Brent Venables when he was talking about the Michigan game, or John Mateer, or whoever it may be. And I guess there are people that are going to go for this, right? But it's not something you're actively involved in. You're just kind of there. I don't know if that warrants a $700 price tag. And there's a lot of individual experiences that were uncovered here that many of us probably didn't know about, including you can be stand on the field for pregame warm-ups at Ohio State before they play Texas for $650. You can, this one is pretty cool, you can run out of the tunnel with Oregon before they play Southern Cal to the tune of $518.92. That is pretty neat. And it's things that I never really thought about that programs are doing, but we're always talking about new avenues for revenue. These are the ways to do it. And I had no idea. I appreciate the listeners that pointed this out to us earlier on when we talked about this. Some of the things that you can do here at Carolina as a part of weekly auctions, which include the Cockaboose experience, which allows you to ride out in the engine of the Cockaboose during its entrance. You can be on the field to watch the warm-ups in 2001 entrance. You can also walk with Cocky and Gamecock Walk. All these things are various auctions that happen every single week throughout the entire season for the team. But Jack and I were theorizing about taking this step further. So instead of just being a part of the Cockaboose, you could drive the Cockaboose, right? Who wouldn't want to pay for that? Now, you're going to have to do a background check and make sure you got your license and all that kind of stuff so you don't go off the rails with it. But, I think we can sweeten the pot a little bit with these kind of things. Instead of watching the 2001 entrance, be part of it. Again, Oregon allows you, I'm assuming you're running out way after the team gets out there, but still you get to come out of the tunnel, the smoke and fire and all that kind of stuff. Instead of just watching 2001, you could be a part of it. You could run out of the tunnel after the team comes out. Instead of walking with Cocky during Gamecock Walk, why not walk with Coach Beamer? Be up there in front. Now, again, he's slapping hands and talking to fans and all that kind of stuff, but you're still at the front of the line. You may get yourself on ESPN, by the way, for them showing the walk into the game and all those kind of things. I like these experiences, but kind of in line with what we're talking about with these other programs, I think we can take a step further, enhance the game day experience. And with that, you can raise the price tag. I think Jay wants to weigh in on this.
I'm sorry to interrupt your show. I'm just picturing somebody at Carolina having to be told give the job to tell the auction winner, you didn't clear the background check for the caboose driving.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I guess you have to pre-qualify
and we're
for that
keeping
auction.
your money, by the way.
But how cool would that be?
Oh, that'd
that
be
you
great,
get to drive the
that'd be great.
Cockaboose
I'm
the field.
I'm here for the task of disappointment. That
Yeah.
What do you mean background check?
Yeah. You've gotten 5 speeding tickets in the past year. I'm sorry.
I'm not going to lie, man. I'm happy that you just put something into my head that would not have been there, and that is background check for caboose driving with a mascot on a football field.
You've got a lot of precious cargo. You got the mascot. You got whoever's going to come out and do the Gamecock chant, right? So you can't have somebody that's careless.
That's true. Especially if it's somebody really famous. All right, I didn't mean to interrupt the Tyler Head Sports experience.
And you're the one that pointed out this to me yesterday that really got me diving in the rabbit hole of like, wow, there's a lot of really unique fan experiences out there, but I feel like we can take it to another level, especially if you're charging $700 for it.
Hey, man, listen, you need new revenue streams everywhere.
Exactly.
So do it.
Drive the cockaboose. That's
There's plenty of people
petition.
that'll line up for that.
Oh, yeah. Pay a lot of money for it,
Just,
too.
Again, clear the background check.
All right, I'll hand things over to Jay and Terry for the post-game show coming up next. As your Friday rolls along, this has been the Halftime Show, sponsored by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina here on The Game. Tyred here for our friends over at Pro Swing Columbia. I've been telling you about it for about the past 2 weeks, and my last chance to remind you, this weekend is the Pro Swing for the Cause Course and Sim Challenge, which is a 2-day charity golf event supporting Prisma Health Children's Hospital in Columbia. It's open to all skill levels. It's a unique event that features indoor simulator golf at Pro Swing tomorrow and Sunday, August 16th and 17th, followed by a traditional 18-hole two-person Captain's Choice Tournament at Cobblestone Golf Club on August the 21st. Again, a great event for a great cause. Go to proswingcolumbia.com to book online, or if you need more information, give them a call at 803-592-3916. Hurry before time runs out. This literally starts tomorrow for the Swing for a Cause Course and Sim Challenge, which again benefits the Prisma Health Children's Hospital in Columbia with our friends over at Pro Swing Columbia.